Welcome to the Center Mid Philosopher. This episode is brought to you by Augustus Royale Fashion. Life's not black and white, it's gray, and gray is beautiful. Check out the brand below in the link. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this week we have an extremely important and incredible guest. Can't even believe I got this gentleman to come on here. It's a bit of a pinch me moment because Liam Tharme from The Athletic, one of my favorite writers in the world and podcasters. So for those that don't read The Athletic or listen to the podcast, please do, because it's groundbreaking. I'd be hard pressed to think of a more on the cutting edge journalistic publication or media services company that is, we were just bragging about you. It's, I think I know a lot, but some of it's even way above my head. So, Liam, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. No, it's an absolute honor, and thanks for those lovely words there. It's just really nice to hear good things.
Yeah. So, rather than me botch it, I'll give just a 2-second intro. But so Liam again is one of the main football tactics writers for The Athletic, and again, that's where some of that stuff just blows my mind. And you studied football coaching and management, performance analysis, and you were a data analyst and performance analyst for Brighton, a club that we love. But if I did any of that wrong, please correct me. But I would love to. Maybe you could just tell everyone your upbringing. But I'd love to hear about you as a player as well, and you coach some as well.
My background was not a very good player. I just played grassroots football in England, in the UK. My excuse now is that I was quite a late maturer, at least physically. When I was sort of 13 or 14, was probably about average height, and then just didn't grow, to be honest. And my football brain, not to be arrogant at all, but it was always okay. It was decent. I had an understanding of positioning and tactics and ways to play and technique, which kind of explains probably why I do what I do now.
Sure.
Sort of fell out with love of playing that because I just wasn't getting game time because coaches didn't want to pick a slow kid that couldn't win games, which I can kind of relate to.
Okay.
Took up coaching when I was sort of 16, 17, while I was in sixth form in the UK. So just before I went to university, studied football coaching and management as my undergraduate in London, and then went on to do, straight off the back of that, a master's in performance analysis, which was just after the pandemic had started to ease a bit, which was great because my sort of final bit of my studies in England, in my undergraduate, were a lot of remote learning, and went, I'd love to be in a club and, get out into the real world properly. So I went and did a master's at Chichester, which is a really sort of prestigious performance analysis course close to Brighton in the UK. And part of that is a placement where you go and spend time in a club. And look, I got to spend 35, 40 hours a week in the training ground at Brighton, working in the academy with the youth teams from 9s up to 21s, mainly with the younger guys, but helping out across the board. And that was so enriching and so much fun to do.
Yeah, so, and I'm moving our questions around a little bit just because I hit the jackpot in getting you to come on the show because I've become slightly obsessed with the data analysis in the beautiful game. And
amazing.
I am a 2 out of 100 on my level of sophistication of it but I did just read a great book called No Grass in the Clouds by Ryan O'Hanlon, a big writer for ESPN, and there's countless other great books out there. But one of the things he did really well was just kind of bring everyone up to speed on the evolution of data analysis, frankly, how early we are with it in soccer, football, and kind of how much further we have to go with it. And, I would love to hear your thoughts, someone that did it, and Brighton is a club that's done it extremely well. I have a lot of questions around this, but one would be, so it's kind of well known now that the likes of Manchester United have not invested a lot in data analysis, whereas the likes of Brighton, Liverpool, Brentford have, and their success shows that. What are some clubs that you've seen that are maybe people aren't talking about that are doing it really, really well? And also, even bigger, what are some, we all know about the expected goals and things like that. What are some, furthermore, how data analysis has really changed the game. For the likes of Liverpool, the way they play, it was discovered that, pressing up and stealing the ball from the D and scoring that way maybe is better than the Barcelona tiki-taka. Now, what are some things that data analytics is uncovering that will influence the game going forward? Like, what are some things that people aren't even talking about?
Well, it's a great way to myth bust, right? And look, it's a piece of information or a tool that goes as part of a bigger picture. I can speak more sort of about academy level because that's where I've worked rather than first team specifically. But there, it's really important on a number of levels. You've got what we call chronological age, so how old someone is relative to their birthday, i.e. the age we use every day. So I'm a 23-year-old. I was born in 2000. But when I was 13 or 14 years of age, if you'd have looked at my biological age, so my physical maturity, maybe I'd have been a very young 13-year-old or sort of older 12-year-old. I'd have been a bit behind where you're expected to be. And then you get things like footballing age. So how long has a player been playing or playing in an academy setup? So you might get someone, Jack Hinchelwood, if anyone's seen at Brighton recently, a graduate who's come through from under nines, has had well over a decade of coaching in an academy system. There'll be under 13s, 14s, 15s that come in, even up to 18s or 21s that come in from non-league football in England. And that's seen as, okay, you've got a younger footballing age. So if you're more ahead than someone else who's had more coaching, that might actually be a positive for you. So that can, I think, sort of account for a lot of the important context at a younger age, which of course you don't quite get at first team level. But what they do have at first team level is now the ability to analyse lots of physical data. So you're looking at runs, off-ball stuff. You're able to get into sort of the nuances now. And we've got, dare I say, too much data, but we've got more than enough that we need. And it's now a case of working out, performance analysis is a discipline that's younger than me, and I'm not particularly old in the footballing sphere, and data analytics is, well, technically fairly old if you look back at when it was first sort of pioneered, but as being a modern thing and a thing that's part of clubs is fairly new. So I think now that the job of the analyst, as you were saying with Liverpool, and you kind of get a split now between sort of more tactical or coaching based analysts that want to pick out tactical stuff and then coach solutions on the pitch or be a part of that team, and then the really good data guys. So at the Athletic, I'm very fortunate to work with Mark Carey, Tom Harris, John Muller, people that are phenomenal with data and have taught me a little bit of coding, but when I see their ability to make great visualizations but also interpret massive sets of data and say we can pick out XYZ as a trend from this and start to use that to ask more questions, I think people see data normally as answers to questions, and it's not. From my experience, you get more questions than you started with, but you get better questions of, okay, what next? As you say, in a game now where it's incredibly physical, and I feel like this is something I've written in a lot of pieces recently, that the game is faster, there's more passes, there's more high intensity stuff. Pressing has become an integral part of most teams' way of playing and is the norm now. Having physical stuff to measure that, and this doesn't just mean looking at GPS for distance covered, but being able to quantify the impact of saying, okay, in a 50-game season, you can't, as much Newcastle are trying, go and press high intense all the time. So when your 4-3-3 high press stops working, or you need to sit off, what are your other solutions going to be when you need to sit off against Paris Saint-Germain and you can't, and then you get played through and concede chances. So it's really added a level of insight there, I think.
That's awesome. I'm curious, we've discussed this quite a bit on the show because as is the name of the show, the Center Mid Philosopher, I was a center mid, but I was more of an 8 than a 6. And we all know that data analysis has uncovered the true value of the number 6. I personally feel like they maybe the pendulum has swung maybe too far the other way, where you've got you've got Casado and the likes of those guys getting paid astronomical sums. Do you feel like they've gotten it right? Those players are truly valued at that, or maybe is it a nice time to go out and buy yourself a new KDB? Although obviously that's a bit of an extreme example, but I'm just curious your thoughts on that particular position.
I think it's become expensive now because, and there's something I looked at sort of at the start of the season, just from a theory I had come up in the office one day, was a lot of top coaches were formerly central midfielders.
Sure. I read that. Yeah.
and it was a bit divisive. People are like, there's actually a lot of centre backs too, and that's
Yep.
also true. And I think a lot of the centre backs now that are coming through were centre backs in high possession teams who
Yep.
will
Number
spend a lot of
fours.
time on the pitch in the midfield third. So they won't be, they're not Lewis Dunk forming under Chris Hughton heading and kicking stuff away, which is a perfectly legitimate style of play. I'm not here to run that down, but in terms of, I think, players that become coaches very naturally. And look, I didn't play at a high level, so my influences are going to be different. But I imagine if you were taught playing away for 15, 20 years, that's naturally going to be how you coach and how you like football to occur. I'm not to tell sort of Xavi or Mikel Arteta otherwise, but I think it's fair to ask questions about that. And then, yeah, when they want that player that can play 80, 90, 100 passes a game, to link play, to win the ball back, the Rodri, the Declan Rice type. You're seeing it, of course, now in different ways with Moises Caicedo. But even Aurelien Tchouameni went for a lot of money recently, or a couple of years ago, Frankie de Jong. Again, these are all slightly different interpretations, and partly because of I think the generations of the countries they've come out of. When you look at the type of player that tends to come out of sort of France's youth academies compared to maybe the Netherlands. It was fascinating because I spent a few days in the academy at PSV recently, they've. I'm really pleased if you read that because that was a great piece to do.
Yeah,
that was great. Thank you.
dude, I read all. Yeah.
Well, that's great. No, I'm honoured. And an interesting thing there is that there's obviously besides maybe Spain 10, 15 years ago, at least the English perspective. And I asked them about this. I said I didn't want to be that ignorant English guy that was like, is the Netherlands really just 4-3-3 high possession football? Or have you guys been stereotyped in England? And they're like, no, that's fairly true. And then you look at the graduates that come out of PSV's academy and get the most money, your Depay's, your Gakpo's, Steven Bergwijn, it will be Johan Bakayoko soon. They're wingers that can cut inside and score goals. They're your match winners there. So it's always going to be goal scorers that people pay lots of money for. I was looking at some CIS data that shows that about half of all the transfer fees or the money spent goes on forwards or strikers, which makes sense because you need goals as much as you want to play possession football. Regardless, you have to score. And now it seems to be increasingly the profiles that people want to play, to build. So it became ball playing goalkeepers, left-footed centre backs, defensive midfielders. And now it's also becoming sort of the number 9 that can drop in and link play a little bit more. And then you get the really expensive inverted winger because then they can cut in or run in behind, attack crosses and get you the 15, 20 goals. So you've made that up kind of in aggregate elsewhere.
Yeah, that's awesome. And no, I've actually listened to a bunch of your podcasts this morning, and you were talking about your time at PSV and almost overlooked what a groundbreaking academy, you know what I mean? Because people talk so much about Ajax and stuff, but they've really been putting them out lately, and that's so cool that you got to really be on the boots on the ground. It's a
pleasure.
The thing with the numbers, I just feel like an example of like the number 6 maybe getting a little ridiculous was Chelsea. I mean, a third of their $1 billion spent was on 3 number 6s, and you're like, I know that number 6s have the most touches and make the most forward passes into the box and stuff, but do those data points lead to goals? Like, I don't know. I just think it's cool. Like, I guess what I'm concluding on the data analysis piece is like, I love it, and I think it's so cool how it has shaped and completely changed styles and the way we view the game. But it also, I feel like we're at the infancy of where it could go. Like, I feel like there's going to be even more data points that come out. We're like, oh man, we weren't capturing that. Like, that's incredible. And
that's the game now. Clubs looking at off-ball stuff, looking at linking. I've forgotten the name now, but data, where you're looking at player positioning, tracking data. There we go. You'll remember eventually. You can take team structures, you can look at shapes or formations, principles, and you can link that then to things like line breaking passes, territory control. So more sort of holistic stuff where you connect everything together. I think my big disappointment, and I can only speak from the English side of the game here, is the way that it's sort of flipped perceptions around defending, because almost all the data that you get access to, at least publicly, event data, is relation to ball touches. Even the defensive stuff is tackles, interceptions, clearances. You have to be touching the ball. There's nothing that's an absence of, they didn't play a pass into zone 14 here, they didn't complete a crossing you can kind of look at on the reverse. But it's made the perception that teams that play in a defensive style, and because England's national teams historically are rooted in playing a long ball direct style, which has largely gone out of fashion, and I've got a piece that's coming out soon sort of saying that will never completely die. And you look at teams that do well against big clubs, especially inferior teams. Brentford, Wolves, Tottenham for a period, Antonio Conte, basically generally. There's not always a lifespan to it, but they still have success. There's a place for them. West Ham are in this weird balance at the moment where sort of half the fan base wants to move on and get rid of David Moyes, because they want a more probably younger continental European manager, because that has become the sexy thing to do in football. And they want someone to press high, to play more expansively. But they also get really deep in European competitions, which fair. They do have the budget for that. But anyone that watches tournament football, and I'm going to broadly guess any tournament sport, knows that the favourites don't win most knockout tournaments. That's why they're so great. They're there for the underdog, because you have to not lose. And you can't, completely bum out at any point or you're done. And their record against the Big Six this season, another piece that I'm writing at the moment, has been excellent. They've won 5 games from 7 or 8, and they've beaten most of the Big Six teams. They've beaten Arsenal twice already. And it's that balance of, just because that is what the numbers are showing you, it's not this meta anymore of have possession, sit in the opposition half. For some coaches that is the right way to play. That's not something I share personally. I think my favourite teams, and I know we were speaking on sort of email about Inter Milan as a great example of this. I just love adaptable teams now, teams that can go, well, you want to press us? Fine, we'll play through you. Or you want to have the ball? We'll sit off and mid-block, we'll counter-attack. Shut us down and open play? Fine, we'll hit you at set pieces. Just sort of that, always having an answer for something. And I guess that's just my favourite people in the world are the ones that are so adaptable and varied, and that translates into football.
That's great, and I love that you hit the nail on the head of, off the ball movement and defensive blocking off passes. There's really no way to capture that, and it kind of speaks to the beauty, what I love about the game. And I watched a lot with my dad, but he didn't play growing up, but I did. We watch games, and I'll say to him, "You're only watching the ball. Look at all the other players. It's like a symphony." And like those old Barcelona teams with Xavi and Iniesta and Messi and Busquets, and of course, I mean, it's like a work of art. And the goal happens, but there's 27 moves and we're not there to being able to capture that yet. But I'm excited that we could get there. So I got to jump to Klopp. I got to get your thoughts.
Sure.
I mean, not to be a conspiracy theorist, but what happened there? I mean, why is he really leaving? Because, I mean, this is the best Liverpool's looked in I don't know how long. They could, but what's going on? And will he coach again? And if so, where?
Yeah, I can't obviously speak on his future with any sort of knowledge.
Sure.
My job might let you be a journalist, but I don't break news. I don't have sources. I literally write on tactics, so I'd have to be guessing. Obviously, the Germany job is being realistically touted. He looks really tired, if I'm honest. And that Liverpool team have played pretty much every single game under the sun possible for the past few years now. They've reached multiple Champions League finals. They've had multiple 90-plus point Premier League seasons and come second during that as well. Domestic cup finals in England, they've won I think every trophy possible under him, and I don't mean for this to sound contrarian or deliberately awkward, but putting again my coaching hat on here is for me it's the perfect time for him to away from it. You don't get many coaches that are able to say on their own terms, I'm sort of done here. We kind of had it with Zidane after obviously they beat Liverpool in that Champions League final off a shorter reign, but I sort of think back to Wenger, a bit to Dyche, a little bit where someone's had a really long tenure, and look, no one's going to have the Alex Ferguson decades thing anymore, or the Wenger. It's just not. It's not the way football works. And they've probably been a more consistent team without winning as many pieces of silverware as Manchester City in that time. City obviously a bit better in the Premier League, but had more crashes and burns in the Champions League. He's evolved a team tactically consistently. He's been a big pioneer for pressing and off-ball stuff, which I think was something that was, that was a stick to beat him with when he first came to the Premier League was, you can't do your Bundesliga things here, or from the Premier League, insert any league you've come from. You can't do that here. This is, our league, which we often put on a pedestal. Guardiola was a big thing with that as well, for changing it to be possession heavy. But I think you take Bournemouth, are a great example now of a team that played really good counter-attacking defensive football for years under Eddie Howe. But them now being a high-pressing team, I'm not saying Adoni Iraola has copied Klopp, because I don't think he has in the slightest. But that perspective of clubs going, we will take a coach from a well-performing team somewhere across the continent and really believe that is a better thing to do than Gary O'Neill, a English head coach who's come through the Premier League for however many years, that is more of a name to English people or English stakeholders within the game. So I think that's amazing. And for Klopp, yeah, he does genuinely look tired. He's been a little bit snidey in some press conferences. I remember early on in the season, I went to the game at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium when Spurs won late on, and I think it was Joel Matip scored a really late own goal. He was talking about the Curtis Jones red card, and it was a bit controversial. We got given on VAR, and he said, "Look, I'll tell you because you haven't played the game that these happen a certain way." And I don't think he meant it rudely. He was sort of trying to explain, the nuances of the speed of professional level and tackles, but said it in kind of a way of, I know this, that I need to sort of teach you. And there was a great clip, I'm not sure if you've seen it, where a lot's been made about their 12:30 kickoffs in UK time and having the early kickoff, especially after international break. And a reporter joked at him about that, and he kicked off massively. So yeah, he looks tired. I was seeing the photos from when he first came in. He looks like he's aged quite a bit, and he has aged 7 years. But that man has been in football an awful long time as a coach. At Dortmund, at Mainz before that. He probably is well overdue a break. And I think it's nice that he can go out now, with the fans knowing for, I think it's 10, 11, 12 games, plus if they get deeper in cups and the Europa League, to, give him a real sort of good send-off. And look, they could win a league, they could do a form of a treble this season. And that is the best way to go, because I think, as sad as it is, the only other option you get is stay too long, get sacked, and it's a young enough squad with enough different versatile attackers that someone else can come in and put their stamp on it.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's a stroke of genius that he's just going out on top. But it's kind of tragic because he's so beloved even by people that aren't Liverpool fans. I mean, he's just he's the anti-special one, right? I mean, he's the and,
the normal one. He said,
yeah, that's right. The heavy metal football, and it's just I hope we see him again somewhere.
Of course,
jumping to the special one. You were discussing Mourinho leaving Roma or getting sacked, and has the game outpaced him a little bit, do you think? And if so, how and why?
Outpaced him? No, because as I said before, there's always a way and a place for his style, but I don't think clubs or teams want it as a primary way of playing anymore. And that's for better or for worse. There's a few teams in the world that sort of do that really, really well. I don't think a club the size of Roma, in a league that is as big as Serie A, one that would accept that anymore. Inter are probably a really good balance of a team that's got it somewhere in the middle, able to do the two of them. And look, Roma have got to European finals. They've won the Conference League. Like, he has gone everywhere and won silverware, and yet not stayed for sort of more than 3 or 4 years. So you then get a balance of, well, what do you want as a manager? Do you want to stay for a really long period of time? Do you want to be a successful league team, be a successful knockout team? And one of the podcast episodes we did recently on the Tactics pod was saying he's probably really suited to international football. He does knockout tournaments really, really well. Good defence first approach. Clearly a good player motivator over short periods of time. But it's not really a style that seems to work over too long of a period. I was looking at the other coaches that succeeded in the Premier League with that kind of style of Dyche, of Nuno, when Nuno went to Spurs and lasted, I think, 17 games and got sacked. That people just don't want it, or right now they don't want it. And it's ironic, because I was wondering, with how possession dominant the game is getting, it's almost more effective than ever if you go, well, if everyone's going to play high possession football, there's even more space for you to go, let's be a 5-3-2 mid-block counter-attack team, because that's going to be really good at stopping most of our opponents. So I wonder if we'll see an increasing rise in that, because I think when we were sort of talking about trends earlier on at the start, more in relation to data, it's looking at that tactically, that's the City thing now where Guardiola is. They're big and they're physical. I'd make a big argument that he's the most defensive coach in the Premier League now. When you look at how much City are sitting off, they still press, but they're often set up to press high and will sit off. Their pass completion is ridiculously high. They don't really risk the ball. They change system to add in another defender to account for Erling Haaland. And fine, that works. It's got them a treble, and being a good defensive team, you need, at some extent, to win the league. Definitely to win knockout tournaments, because, as I've already said, you can't get away with conceding many goals and losing games. So I think Mourinho is an example of something that works as a really good plan B, or as like half of a plan A, but it can't be the only thing that you do anymore. And look, he had enough success. That Chelsea team that conceded something like 15 goals in the Premier League will probably never be beaten, especially now that teams play out all the time and will give up 3 or 4 goals from misplaced back passes and whatnot. It's just how football moves in terms of it's almost like cultural or societal values sort of change over time, and
Yeah.
now people care about the identity of things a lot, and that's fine. That's the way it is.
Yeah, you mentioned internet. I mean, geez, I wonder if he'd come over to the US of A and coach. That might be a good fit. I don't know if he would do it, but so it's transfer
I'd
season.
watch that.
Yeah, you would watch that. I know that it would either be a smashing success or a total dumpster fire. Probably a dumpster fire, knowing us. But you know, so it's transfer season and it's concluding. Want to pick your awesome brain for there's been some really good ones as you were talking about Endrick to Real Madrid, although that happened a while ago and he'll be there later. Echeverri similar from River to Man City, and Gabriel Marscardo from Corinthians to PSG. Valentin Barco to your Brighton. I know you're excited about that one. Lucas Bergvall to Barcelona. And you wrote about Jean-Claire Todibo from Nice. Any others that you're really excited about and that you might illuminate us on?
I mean, Tadiba's a great one. I think I'm just a huge advocate for signing absolutely anyone from Ligue 1. It's the self-declared Ligue de Talents, which is not a sounds quite self-centered or quite
Boastful.
egotistical, but it is correct though when you look at the sheer proportion of minutes that come out of that league, and France's cultural acceptance to give lots of minutes to young players. They're always way out in terms of the top 5 leagues. The other one in that league that's the big one this season is Warren Zaire-Emery, Paris Saint-Germain, who is probably their most important central midfielder now, which is quite crazy because I think he's 17. Luis Enrique's been using him in sort of a real variety of midfield roles. He started, in a 3. He's played more advanced. Recently, he's been stuck out at fullback and rolled into midfield in sort of a box midfield. And he's just, these everything midfielders you see now where you can have him pressed from both sides and he can find a way to rig it out. His passing range is great. His finishing, his ball striking is off the charts. So somewhere you go, like physically, you still don't look that ridiculously developed. You still you could, they always say, oh, you could fill out more, that he get bigger. It's like almost think about how good he becomes when he's actually a man rather than just this boy. So Ligue 1 is a real pleasure to watch. It gets its fair critique sort of tactically and in terms of PSG dominating the league. It's entirely true. You do tend to get a good mix of competitors in sort of second to third or fourth. Financially, it's a bit on fire at the moment with the TV rights deal and the absence of that. I know obviously Ronaldo made some very wrong, I'll say, comments about it recently in the Saudi Pro League, which I think just jarred an awful lot. And I still think it's the primary league that the Premier League tends to source from. And look, the whole reason why France over the past 10, 11, 12 years under Didier Deschamps have had so much success is that they've consistently had young players coming through and been able to use those in different roles to sustain a team and get to finals to win the World Cup. Like back-to-back World Cup finals is such a testament, and it's the reason why England copied them and Germany and Italy with their setups around youth football. That's
awesome. Before, I want to hear a little bit more about your experience and expertise on Nice, but before I jump to that, the one last transfer again, we're Americans over here and be interested in your thoughts on the Gio Reyna transfer to Nottingham Forest. I think the prevailing sentiment is not great, frankly, on it.
Okay.
I think we mean that as a tremendous amount of respect to the EPL and just how incredible it is. It's getting better every year. It could be a smashing success, but I think we all get worried that it's just another Leeds 2.0 where it could be really successful, but Nottingham has they're on kind of some murky footing a little bit. Maybe you could educate us a little bit on the landscape at Nottingham Forest right now.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I'm by no means an expert, so I'll say what I do.
More than us.
If people want to read the specific details, well, we'll find out. If people want to read the specific details, there's some great stuff on the site of The Athletic where it's all sort of broken down. They've been accused of, I think, breaching some kind of financial fair play regulations, which could possibly result in a points deduction. So there's off-the-field problems there. the wider context for them is that they came up 2 seasons ago into the Premier League. They had a coach take over a few games into the season, Steve Cooper, and they were, I believe, bottom of the Championship at the time. Went on an incredible run, ended up in the playoffs, won the playoffs and came up and had a squad that, I don't want to misuse the Super Bowl window sort of phrase, but they weren't probably ready to go up, quote unquote, in the sense of they had a lot of loan players in there that were leaving. I think they lost a couple of players either on free transfers or they got sold. So they had to basically source a load of replacements and then had to start building a new team as they got into the Premier League. It wasn't like they built it more like a Fulham or like a Wolves when they came up and then could sort of, stick around and add in additions. It was like, no, we need a new whole half of a squad. They stayed up pretty well last season, were quite a counter-attacking team, changed system a couple of times and found something that stuck by the end of it. Obviously, they beat Arsenal to give City the Premier League title. And they've kind of doubled down on that this season. Things fell apart a little bit with Cooper. They sacked him or they felt like they stagnated. And they brought in Nuno, formerly of Wolves and Tottenham, and have really doubled down on this counter-attacking style. So I get it as seeing a forward go from a Champions League knockouts team or group-winning team in Borussia Dortmund to go into a team that's trying to avoid relegation in the Premier League. But I think game time is ridiculously important for any young player. I can see from what I've seen of him, and admittedly this is some limited USMNT stuff that I watched sort of pre-World Cup, a really, really good athletic player that's going to work well in a team where he can be really athletic, lots of space to exploit and run into on the break. He's got Chris Wood, who's in great form, is a really good physical target man that can set passes, play flick-ons, and often in a wing-back system where they play sort of number 10s. If anyone's seen Morgan Gibbs-White play, he's another great sort of individualistic technician that you can give the ball to and can beat players, can finish from the edge of the box. So there's probably a good scenario in there as well, in that there's a few different roles that he can fulfill. I think if you look at Borussia Dortmund, that there's probably relatively fewer places he can slot in, maybe either flanker in a number 10 sort of role. But here you could argue he could fulfill a few wider different places, and minutes are really important. And I think if it's having more minutes at Nottingham Forest rather than fewer minutes at Borussia Dortmund, then it's probably on balance a good thing. And that's, I think, if anyone wants to look for examples of that, just look at the places Brighton have sent some of their players on loan to. Like Moises Caicedo went to, I think it was Beerschot in Belgium, who were one of the bottom clubs. Like they sent, it's technically not a feeder club, it's a club they've got connections with in Union Saint-Gilloise, but they've sent Karim Mitoma there into Belgium's Pro League, not a top 5 European league. Dennis Undav they did the same with as well. They bought him from there, left him there, and brought him over afterwards, and he's now at Stuttgart scoring quite a few goals there, chasing the title. So I think people can maybe place a bit too much stock in terms of the club and overlook the importance of having time on the pitch, playing at a really top level, and being under a manager that suits their style.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, he was rumored Sevilla for a minute there. Fiorentina kind of came in at the last minute. Real Sociedad, Marseille. I think my sentiment is for a lot of Americans is like it can be tough. And I know Nottingham Forest is not Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal, even Chelsea, Man U, although they're not doing as well, but they're still gold standard marquee names. I mean, I view any team in EPL as kind of gold standard, and might he get more playing time for a Fiorentina or a Marseille or Real Sociedad? Of course, is killing it this year, and Sevilla has obviously done well the last couple of years. But I guess from my standpoint, and again, I mean, this is a total sign of respect for the English Premier League, and that's what I grew up watching. Is the room for error is really low. And I just feel like maybe someone like him might need a little bit more of a forgiving environment where, like we all, Pulisic is having the year of his life at AC Milan, and Chelsea. I mean, that's a whole other thing. They buy 900 players to field 11-person team, but and
no striker.
And no striker, right? They get 19 number 6s, and no, but just that if he can come in and do well, that will be a smashing success. But I just worry, you're always 4 mistakes away from the end of the bench, and then no one remembers you.
No, that's true. There's great comments. Some of that. Sorry to just jump in. That Rasmus Højlund was saying last night he was interviewed after the Wolves Manchester United game, and saying, sort of how does this compare to when he played in Serie A in Atalanta, which was one of the most possession, rotation heavy teams and really top end side. You were saying like, it's even faster here than it is there, that you've got really good defenders there, but and there's a lot of 3-5-2s or back threes in Italy as well, and fewer now in England. But even he was saying, it's even a slightly higher level here. You've got to be that tiny bit sharper, that tiny bit quicker. And it's something that, again, I'm probably guilty of not always being able to see or appreciate when I do watch sort of different leagues, that, yeah, those things are different. And as we were sort of speaking about with Nice as an example recently, that's something I have to factor in, looking at their players and their coaching and saying, how might that translate?
Yeah. No, I mean, EPL has just gotten the amount of money pouring in there, and, it's just, it's the best of the best of the best. And I hope he can do it well. I mean, we're rooting for him. We need him to do well. And,
sure.
But yeah, I mean, if he comes in and starts getting 2, 3, 4 goals pretty early on, I mean, wow, that'd be huge. But not everyone can do it. And but yeah, you touched on Nice in Ligue 1, the just incredible tactical play coming out of there, and Nice's defensive brilliance. Have they been kind of one of your favorite under the radar teams of the year, or are there others that you might say to the viewers and listeners, like, go give them a look? They're doing some really revolutionary things.
Revolutionary might be pushing it. I'm always very conscious to box teams in as that, but then I'm like, what's revolutionary? What isn't? It sort of depends who you ask. And I think there's people more, even more well versed in sort of tactics and analytics than I, that were aware of Francesco Farioli, who's their coach there in sort of previous roles. The same so he's someone that worked under Roberto De Zerbi at Sassuolo in Italy together. I think what was just great is that people would very quickly profile him as sort of a person that's going to be similar, or, disciple seems to be the word that gets used for like Arteta off Guardiola as someone that worked under him. And surely you both tend to have quite a bit of possession, but use it really differently. And maybe this is my English side showing, as someone who grew up in England in the early 2000s, that I still really enjoy defensive football, or teams that are capable of being stubborn and hard to beat. And these are great because they use that, but they defend by keeping the ball for the most part. They keep possession really nicely. They draw teams onto them. They'll hit long after building short for a few passes on the front three. Tillem Moffi is a fantastic number 9 to watch, who, can go 1v2. Not many strikers. I think of maybe a Dominic Solanke who can do that. The old Drogba, style striker that can play on his own and then connect to sort of really quick wingers. Jeremy Boga is a great winger there. And Gaetan Laborde, sort of an inside forward off the right. And sort of everyone was talking about Kefren Turam, obviously son of Lillian, that plays in midfield. And it's great because even he sort of gets a bit misprofiled. They're like, oh, he's a big 6'4" sort of deep lying player. And I'm like, he's kind of a dribbler. He's sort of like when you get a puppy that grows into a big dog and still thinks they're a puppy, and it's like, I'm going to do these things, and it works. I think it's a great example of finding solutions with the profiles of player that you have, and works really well. And as we were saying before, Ligue 1 is somewhere where you can be a bit more tactically experimental. It's not quite as quick. They tend to press quite high and will be a bit bold. Often they'll pull a winger across and press out of this sort of weird asymmetric 4-4-2 where they're going fullback to fullback, and you're like, that's a lot of ground to cover, but things aren't quite as quick in France. So if you are half a second late, you maybe don't get punished like you would in the Premier League, where that's Kevin De Bruyne getting half a yard.
Right.
Suddenly your entire team, you're 1v keeper. And I always just like teams that are prepared to do something a bit different. There's the stuff about Farioli studying philosophy at uni, which just feels right to sort of be, I think, fetishized by anyone in the media, which I'm very conscious of not doing. But I just like the fact that he's not had a professional playing background. He's prepared to look at the game a bit differently to just saying, this is what I was taught 15, 20 years ago. And that's purely because I don't have a pro playing background. So for me, it reassures me that, okay, there's a place for people like me in the game. That's all it is. It's my need for validation.
That's cool. Just a couple more questions. I appreciate all your time, but you wrote a piece on Lautaro, a personal favorite of mine, especially as of late.
Nice, great.
Where do you think he ranks in the Ballon d'Or conversation? I mean, he's got to be top 3 or 4 in my opinion.
He's up there. Yeah.
What do you think about him and Inter's brilliance this year? I mean, you've covered them a little bit. You know, maybe they don't get as much hype as some of the others, but you think they have another shot at the Champions League title?
Pound for pound, one off, if not in Europe. were excellent. I mean, I wrote a piece pre-Champions League final saying don't write them off, and lots of people have said, look, this is going to be a walk in the park for City.
And it
3-4-0, Haaland hat-trick. And I was like, one, because how they play tactically and can be so defensive when they need to be, and their shape was going to naturally counter out City, let alone the fact that they go to so many finals. They've now won 5 Derby delle Madonninas in a row, which neither Milan team had done before, which is incredible. They've been cup specialists. They've won, I think it's 5 of 6 finals now. And you look at the team beaten in the Italian Cups and the Super Cup. Juve, I think Juve twice, Milan, Napoli recently, who sure are on fire a bit as a club this season, but they beat them in Rio for the Super Cup. And they're great because they're so adaptable. As we sort of said at the start, they can play in loads of different ways. And Lautaro is great because, look, he's this 5'9" guy that looks like he's part of a little man, big man strike partnership that, you know, we had in 2000s in England where people played 4-4-2, and he'd play alongside a Romelu Lukaku or an Edin Dzeko, and they'd play flick-ons to him. Yeah, and it's not like that. He is phenomenally strong back to goal. There's a great example. They lose the derby, but it's one of the early derbies, I think, at the start of last season, where he holds off Fikard Tomori for about 4 or 5 seconds and pops the ball to a midfielder, and they get through a score. So he can do that stuff really well. He connects with whichever striker you put next to him. He's doing it so well with Thuram this season. They mix stuff up so well. Score of goals in big games. I know he had a really bad World Cup, which sucked for him, and he got hooked, and then Alvarez came in and was great, which is fair enough because of people. Not everyone has a job like me, which I'm fortunate to have, where I get to watch a lot of football, which means I can watch 6 or 7 games of Inter, and say, oh, I've actually got an opinion on this player from what he does in the league and his Copa America, Champions League. There was once upon a time where I might only see him in the World Cup, and he was bad, and that is not the place you want to be bad. But I think the stat I pulled out, which maybe contextualise it, was I think going into the World Cup and just coming out of it, he played something like 89 Inter games in a row, and then factor in travel for international games. There's some quotes I saw where he said like, it's tiring, you know, and you go to South America where the climate's very different, and suddenly you're going to Ecuador on a qualifier and having to play at altitude, or it's hot, and then you're coming back to cold Milan in January and February and having to play there. That these are human beings as much as they've become really elite, really technical, and he's a great example. You look at his goal scoring record now, is he 8th in the charts, I think? He's up there with Icardi, who he came in to replace. He's above Vieri. He's 2 goals off Ibra in the Derby delle Madonninas. He's excellent. Someone in the Premier League to sign him. They were really do.
Yeah, he's a beast. I've been preaching him all year long. One last question is England Euro. They've never looked better. This is about as good as they've looked. Are they going to do it this year? And who's your starting 11 now? Or you don't even have to name all 11, but I'm kind of curious. Are there any notable? This person's in, this person's out, and then the last piece of it is, does Cole Palmer get a shot at the starting 11?
Starting 11, maybe not. He's definitely in there. I said, you know, that he was. He's been really good. He's been great for Chelsea. I mean, one, because he's a really good penalty taker. He gets in there probably regardless. Let alone when you think how good he's been for the 21s and of that generation who won the Euros in the summer, is probably ready to make that step up. Look, the team, and I did a piece on this, I think it's September, saying like England, you know, Southgate's found a system now, the 4-2-3-1. He's tried a few different things. It was initially the back three, or going into major tournaments was, we'll go attacking against weak opposition, knockouts, it's going to be a back three, a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2, sort of similar balance. It's got to be a 4-2-3-1. It needs to be Jude Bellingham in the 10.
Of course. Give
him as much license as possible. Harry Kane in the 9. Bellingham can then, you know, they can rotate. We'll see out in the wide areas. There's a lot of scope, depends how you want to attack there. You've got, you know, Sterling has been consistently quite good for England, has played various roles. Marcus Rashford can be a goal scorer off the left on his really good days. Anthony Gordon has been excellent this season and is a great player in terms of his energy. It seems to flag a bit after 70, which is fair enough because he's probably doing 10 to 20 sort of 80-metre sprints or equivalent a game where, you know, I'd be exhausted after 2 or 3.
Sure.
And I think it's just balancing that midfield. I think it needs to be Bellingham, Rice, and then I think my current balances against better teams, I'd probably go for Conor Gallagher, someone who's a bit more tenacious, a better ball winner. And if it's against, you know, weaker opposition or a team that's a real low block, maybe you look at Trent Alexander-Arnold in midfield and, you know, have his passing range. forming the back line beyond that, I think, can be a little bit more balanced. And I'm still a big advocate for Jordan Pickford in goal, despite the critique he seems to get. He's always quite divisive in England.
See, I'd put Palmer in there instead of Rashford. I know it's a totally different player and a totally like
Sure,
but I don't know. Poor Rashford. I'm a Man U guy. I hate it for him. He's kind of under tough times, and they might be being a little too tough on him. But so who do you think is the best English player right now? Not Bellingham or Kane. Who do you think's the third? Who do you think is?
Oh, that's a really hard question.
I have one.
Because the thing is that the floor has come up a really, really long way. So I've the one that surprised me most this season is Gordon in terms of his big game ability. Has really stood out. He was great when I watched him a decent bit at Everton and had a really phenomenal under-21 Euros where, sure, this is 21s football where England should be above most teams for the footballing pyramid, the academy system, and the fact that he should put in more money than most countries do. But he played as a false nine a lot of the time in this real high possession system, like the farthest thing you could think of from how he played at Everton, which was stay wide, defend, and then you've got to run and go on the transition. This is score headers off cutbacks, attack the box, link play. So he's been the one that's excited me most. He's been my favourite.
Yeah, that's a good one. I've been big on Trent Alexander-Arnold this year. I mean, that's not really a genius pick, and people are like, well, he's
good.
He's a center mid playing right back. And I'm like, well, maybe that's the genius. Like maybe keep him there because he's killing it there. But anyway,
like good players do good things.
Yeah, and well, cool. So thank you so much. And then I've just kind of got our last rapid fire questions. You'll probably scoff at some of these, but if that's cool with you,
I'll give it my best.
So number one, Messi or Ronaldo?
It's always been Messi for me. I was a left-footed player, so I always biased left-footers, and I liked his simplicity of play. The best way I can describe it.
Well, and I tell you, we started the show before the World Cup, and it was still heavily skewed towards Messi. But since the World Cup, we may have to retire that question because there aren't a lot of Ronaldos anymore. Messi or Maradona?
I'll have to say Messi on the pure basis that I've only ever seen clips of Maradona. My dad will probably shout at me for that, but look, I wasn't alive and when Maradona was doing his thing, so I can only comment on what I was there to see.
Yeah, well, and I'm aging myself. I'm not that old, I don't think, but I did grow up at like 10 watching Maradona, and that was so. Messi is probably the GOAT, but Maradona has a special place in my heart. How about Ronaldo or Ronaldo? So Cristiano versus
Brazilian or. Do you know what? I'd love the fact Brazilian Ronaldo R9, the one that always used to go around the keeper, right? So I'll pick you on the basis that I don't see enough people go around the keeper anymore, and I just love that as a way of scoring.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Oh yeah, that was this thing. You might laugh and say who, but Donovan or Dempsey, the American.
No, I know of Landon Donovan and Clint Dempsey. Obviously, I saw more of Clint Dempsey at Fulham. Obviously, a big part of a good team when I was growing up. And I can't remember who he scored against, but I remember seeing Landon Donovan score. I think it's a World Cup goal where it's scrappy and he runs in late to smash it into an empty net. I'll have to do Clint Dempsey because I saw him more. I think he was part of the Fulham team that got to the Europa League final in the early sort of 2010s. So I'm just picking my favourites of what I've seen, but I don't know how else to do it.
Name your perfect 11 of all time if you can. You can just reel them off.
Oh God, that's really hard to do. I'm just going to forget all the good players now. I'll start at the top. This might be weighted more by sort of current players, just because I feel like that's when I watch sort of more football. But Harry Kane's been my favourite forward probably to watch. I'd have to put someone like De Bruyne in the 10. I think Iron Robin off the right. Nice. I love left-footed players. Anyone that can cut inside and score. I'm going to do a very deliberate thing of like not putting players that are going to work in a balanced system, so this team can play together. But Gareth Bale off the left was one of the best players. Well, in Spanish football, despite the fact he didn't play loads in the Premier League, definitely, and internationally was always incredibly clutch. I'll go for, and people will probably shout at me for this, but I'm going to go what comes straight into my head. I'll go Cesc Fabregas and Iniesta as a Spanish midfield pairing, just two really classy passes of the ball. I'll go thinking of the back line now. Sergio Ramos at centre back,
Sure.
as a captain, because just a phenomenal athlete. Scored goals as well. Scored a lot of headers.
Yeah.
And I'll go Cannavaro next to him because I feel like I need someone from the early part of my my childhood. And then I'm struggling for fullbacks. It'll probably have to be like Roberto Carlos off the left, just
Sure.
for being such a good ball striker. And let's go Philip Lahm off the right for some discipline, because he never got a red card, I don't think.
Nice.
I think that's the thing. And obviously the Pep thing can put him into midfield. And then in goal, it probably is Mamonoy. It probably is, thinking about it.
Nice.
Just, what a revolutionary keeper of his time.
Awesome. You have a favorite jersey of all time?
I mean, there's a few behind me that I've got, so I'm sort of trying to think it through. There's one that I really like. It's the closest one I could find to my birth year, was a 2002 Brighton home kit, which is
Nice.
It's really nice material. It's blue and white stripes. It's the old, not the circular badge they've got now. They used to have one which was the Brighton and Hove, which is sort of two places, the town crest or the city crest that were crossed over. So yeah, that one is my favorite. I wear that for home games.
Nice. And this is the last question. This is a wild one, but it gets some funny, interesting responses. If you were to compare your personal playing style to a band, what band would that be and why?
I actually had a real sort of think through this. I was really unsure. Can I pick a rapper? Is that allowed?
Lord, yeah.
I listen to a lot more, despite being a white boy from England. I listen to a lot of rap. And
nice.
I was trying to think. So when you say style, you mean like if I was playing football?
Yeah.
Or just okay. So I was thinking, as a weird, actually, half sort of mix between the States and the UK. 21 Savage, and the way that he
Nice.
Quite methodically, but with a lot of balance, that I played either left back because I was left-footed, or in midfield because my endurance was good. So I was never really never flashy, never too aggressive, but would just, it's metronomic. It goes and it goes. So that's the best way.
Cerebral and that's good. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Thinker.
Nice. Well, Liam, this has been unbelievable. You surpassed expectations, and the expectations were high.
Oh, I'm pleased.
I'm honored to have you. It's kind of unbelievable that you came on, and I would love to have you on again. And if you have any of your colleagues that might be amenable to giving me 45 minutes, I would do anything I could, because I think a world of all of you guys, and I'm a huge fan. It's about as high level as it gets. And for viewers and listeners that don't, check out Liam Tharme's work on The Athletic and the podcast. It's brilliant. And so I'll keep in touch if that's cool with you. And maybe if you can think of a name or two, I would just be floored. But Liam, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
All right, be well. I'll be rooting for you.
Thank you, man.
All right, see ya. Bye.